We asked 15 experts from around the country, from inside and outside the Beltway, from the private sector, from academia, from the policy world, from both sides of the political aisle, and we asked them what they would do.
On February 22nd and February 26th, the Hamilton Project is going to have a two-part event that is intended to address the federal budget deficit and the challenges associated with that. We've titled it Real Specifics, 15 Ways to Rethink the Federal Budget. And our goal when we set out to do this several months ago was to move beyond the headlines of the fights between the President and Congress about the broad contours of a budget deal, but rather to provide some of the poetry or some of the details of how government might run better.
I think it's important to recognize that we've already made a lot of progress reducing the budget deficit. Over the last 2 years, policymakers have agreed on roughly $2.5 trillion worth of deficit reduction. And that leaves just about $1.5 trillion left to go. And so part of the idea of our events was to establish a menu of options that policymakers could choose from to help address that $1.5 trillion hole.
Exactly. And what we were hoping with this menu of potential policies is that we would be able to provide the kind of detailed evidence-based proposals that would both make contributions to the reducing the federal budget deficit, but also with an eye towards running an efficient economy and an economy that can make the lives of Americans better, even in these austere budget times.
On February 22nd, we're going to have our first budget event called Budgeting for a Modern Military. And at that event, we're going to hear from retired Admiral Gary Roughead and former CBO Assistant Director Cindy Williams, who've written 2 new discussion papers for the Hamilton Project about how to rethink the military budget.
I don't want to give away, I know everyone will be lining up to come to these events, and I don't want to give away the punchline, but one thing that I think we both found really remarkable about these papers was that here you got a retired 4-star admiral, and on one hand, and on the other hand, you have Cindy Williams, who's probably in the Hall of Fame of budget nerds, and what they both came up with from these very different perspectives was a way to reshape the military in ways that would both protect our national security and at the same time allow the Department of Defense to contribute to the necessary consolidation of the budget in the coming decades.
And so discussing those papers at our event will be John Deutsch, Sam Nunn, and Michelle Flournoy.
That's the first part of our 2-part budget event, and the way we tried to pull them together was we called them Real Specifics, 15 Ways to Rethink the Federal Budget. And the second part, the title of that event, which will be held on February 26th, is Addressing Entitlements, Taxation, and Revenues. And so there we're going to have 13 of our specific ideas presented. Each and every author, people are flying in from California, coming from Boston, are going to be there to talk about their ideas.
We placed very few restrictions on what these authors, on the mandate for these authors. We asked them to come up with their best ideas on their topics of expertise. We asked them to draw on their practical experience, to use the best evidence available to them, and to come up with policies that both help the budget and also provide economic benefits. And so we have 13 authors who are focused on areas like entitlements, tax reform, other spending programs, and each of them has done a deep dive into their particular area of expertise. And we have a range of proposals covering things ranging from Medicare to tax expenditures to disaster relief and transportation.
I think there's some very, very creative ideas that will be presented there, and those ideas are going to, those will be at the heart of whatever budget deal comes out. And so I think the disaster relief paper is really an interesting one. It takes a very careful look at the ways in which we incentivize, the incentives can be changed so that American society is better prepared to deal with disasters like hurricanes and earthquakes. And that's going to be increasingly important as the intensity of those events becomes more frequent with climate change.
We asked a number of experts to look at proposals to reduce tax expenditures. So we have 4 proposals related to this, a paper about how to change the mortgage interest deduction, to reduce it to promote efficiency in the housing sector and to raise some revenue, We have a proposal that looks at ways to limit fossil fuel subsidies, these subsidies that operate through the tax system. And then we have two more papers, one that looks at tax expenditures holistically and asks what approaches there are to reducing them across the board. And finally, one of our authors takes a close look at how to reduce the tax expenditures related to saving.
You know, another one paper that I think bears special mention is the paper on immigration reform by Giovanni Perry and a couple of co-authors. And what that paper does is take a completely new look at immigration. And again, it's framed in, well, how can immigration reform help the budget? And what it says is, well, we have a series of employment-based visas that are temporary, and instead of handing them out in a lottery process, we could have an auction. And so it provides a way to both make sure that the most talented immigrants are arriving in the U.S. for employment visas, and at the same time to make some contribution to solving our budget problems.
I think the paper on savings incentives is especially interesting. It draws on a lot of new research that suggests that the savings incentives we currently have aren't great ways to promote savings. In fact, this recent research suggests that savings incentives like we have for defined contribution plans, your 401k or your IRA, they just encourage people to take the savings they would have done and then to repackage them in a tax-efficient way. So it's something that doesn't promote national saving, it doesn't promote retirement saving, and yet reduces tax revenues quite a bit. And in contrast, this literature suggests that automatic IRAs, behavioral interventions that encourage people to set up IRAs right when they start a job, or 401ks right when they start a job, and to contribute to those plans, those actually do increase net saving, and they help people build for retirement. And so this proposal suggests shifting the composition of how we encourage retirement savings.
You know, another paper that I think is going to get a lot of attention in the coming years is a paper by Adele Morris, The Many Benefits of a Carbon Tax. She points out that one could do it in a way that is protective of low-income people, and another feature of it, of course, is that currently, without any tax on or price on carbon emissions, what happens is we're paying for carbon emissions, except we're just doing it in very opaque ways. We have Hurricane Sandy, we have extremely hot summers, we have crop failure, and by instead taking on carbon emissions directly, it would be possible to make a contribution to the federal budget deficit and make some progress or traction on reducing the rate of climate change.
We're really looking forward to hearing from these experts. It's going to be 2 great days.
Don't let the 15 ideas be daunting. These are going to be fun, insightful ideas that will help you understand the federal budget better and to see that there's a path forward to running a federal government that is both more sustainable from a budget perspective and can make our economy and the lives of Americans better.